Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Welcome to the Alex Jones Show. It is Monday, September 2nd, Labor Day, and this has been an amazing weekend. We have some amazing news, and I'm sure you've heard it by now, but we still keep looking at this. What Obama said on Saturday, basically that he was actually going to follow the Constitution. But wait, he didn't really say that. It was a bit confusing when you saw the announcement. And he said at first that he had the right to strike anytime he wanted to. And then he said, might happen tomorrow, might happen in a couple of days, it might happen the next week. But he said he had the authority to do it. And then he started saying he was going to go to Congress. So basically, he's kind of, making the case that he can do it at any time he wants. He still has the authority to do this, but he's going to actually follow the Constitution. But now we hear from Fox News, they've been told from the State Department that he plans on doing this anyway, whether he gets congressional approval or not. So we'll have to wait and see. But either way, this is a huge, huge sea change. It was a big deal when the British Parliament, the end of the week, voted down the Prime Minister. It's the first time since 1782 that they voted down a Prime Minister's recommendation for war. At that time, they were recommending to go to war continue the war against America. And they voted that down. But since then, they have not gone against a prime minister's recommendation, and they did. And then on Friday night, I was eating in a restaurant, and I was looking at CNN on television, and I was just, the sound was down, so I was just looking at the subtitles and the lower thirds, and they kept putting up there on the lower thirds that Obama was war-weary. Well, he's not war-weary. It's the American people that are tired. We're tired of war, and more importantly, we're tired of being lied to. And this is a revolution that's being led by InfoWars and alternative media. People are waking up. Only a 9% approval rating. He could see where this was heading. He could see that they had blinked in the UK. He could see that people were very mad even in France, because both France and the UK, they had about 70% of the people who opposed the war. The French went ahead and approved it, but now that looks like even that's going to be questioned. It was thrown out in England, but instead of 70% of the people opposing it, here in America, it was 90% opposing it. So that's why they pulled back. It isn't that he wants to go to Congress. He doesn't want to go to Congress. He doesn't even want to go to the UN. He wants to do whatever he wishes to do, but he's doing it. And we've got major figures like Ron Paul, Pat Buchanan, saying for the first time, this is a false flag. That's not the kind of terminology you heard anywhere except InfoWars until the Boston bombing. Then that term got discussed quite a bit. We made a very good case that it was a false flag attack there. Now everybody is aware of the technique of a false flag, and you see people not afraid to come out and say that this is exactly what's going on now. Vladimir Putin didn't say that, but he actually defined what a false flag was. He said this is utter nonsense, and then he talked about how they're using this narrative to do what they want to do, this false constructed narrative. But this is really, really blowing up in their face. Even after he said that he was going to go to Congress. Now we've got this thing that's going viral. First we had one naval officer who held up a sign that said he wasn't going to go fight in a Syrian civil war on the side of al-Qaeda, and it is exploding all over the social media. You've got all kinds of soldiers and sailors holding up signs essentially saying the same thing. That brings up a danger that they may actually do a false flag that's even bigger. Here even, they might do something because people are not seeing that this is something that we need to be involved in. We don't have a dog in this fight. So they may try to do something here. We're going to have a special report coming up from Alex Jones. He's going to be joining us in the studio at the midpoint of the broadcast at 12:30 Central Time. He's going to be coming in and talking about where we are, the sea change, and the danger that comes up of a new false flag. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex Jones.
Texas Command Center and the heart of the resistance. It's Alex Jones.
That's right. We're right here from Austin. And I'm filling in for Alex Jones. My name is David Knight. This is Monday, September the 2nd, Labor Day. And we were talking just before the break about what an amazing revelation we've had this week of the Obama regime backing down. And I use the term regime. You know, they love to say that it's the Obama administration and it's the Syrian regime, or it's the Iranian regime, or it's whoever they're trying to demonize at the moment. They have a regime, but we have an administration. Well, we have an administration when they start following the Constitution, and they haven't been doing that. But it looks like maybe they will, except that we then learned from Fox News that the State Department has said, no, regardless of what Congress says, he's going to attack. So we'll see what happens. We've got about a week before Congress comes back, and the UN inspectors have left Syria, and they're saying it's going to take them about a week to analyze the data. Now, the last time the UN inspectors went into Syria and looked at as a supposed gas attack, they ruled that it indeed was sarin gas, and they ruled that it was the rebels. And one of the reasons they did was because both the way that it was delivered, they were homemade rockets, and the sarin gas itself was homemade. You know, it doesn't take a military-industrial complex to make sarin gas. The most famous sarin gas attacks, outside of what Saddam Hussein did, the most famous ones were the ones that happened in Japan, and those were done by a small cult. So it doesn't take a military-industrial complex to do a sarin gas attack. And what they found in May, that was just a couple of months ago, they found that it was a rebel attack, that it was a false flag attack. They were trying to blame it on Syria to try to draw in or to give an excuse for the U.S., which is actually not reluctantly drawn in. We don't have a government that, as CNN likes to characterize it, is war-weary. Obama is not weary of war at all. As a matter of fact, over the weekend, he was still doing drone strikes. He had 6 people killed in Yemen. He had another 3 that he killed in Pakistan. What we have here is a president who is killing people all the time with drone strikes. What it looks like is really just a couple of thugs going at it, like the Bloods and the Crips. You know, they have their drive-by shootings in the neighborhood where they try to set up their turf wars. Well, Obama's got fly-by shootings. You know, he comes in and basically goes against this other gang. The only place where this analogy breaks down is the fact that he actually creates and controls that other gang. You know, the Al-Qaeda was created by Zbigniew Brzezinski during the Carter administration, which eventually became Al-Qaeda. It was the Mujahideen, is what they called themselves at the time. And they were Reagan's freedom fighters, and they're still allied with us in many areas, especially in Syria. As Kucinich said, we would be going in on the side of Al-Qaeda. We would be their air force. And he and Ron Paul and many people are asking why we would do this. Well, why have we had the kind of foreign policy that we've had since World War II? Why do we get involved in every civil war, every struggle, everywhere? Usually we wind up arming both sides, making enemies of both sides, and then selling even more weapons when we go in and take out both sides. And it looks like that's what they're trying to do again. Now, this is a huge sea change. And Alex Jones is going to be here at the midpoint of the show, and he's going to be talking about the implications of this. This has been so big. There's been a moving revolt on social media. We've got people holding up signs who are sailors and soldiers saying they're not going to go fight in a civil war on the side of Al-Qaeda. This is really huge. Only 9% of the people support this. Remember, during the Iraq War, Bush had about 72% approval rating, but that was BS. That was before Snowden. That was before the alternative media InfoWars were vindicated and verified about what we've been telling the public about government spying for quite some time. Let's look at some of the news that's breaking today. We've got from the New York Times, drug agents use vast phone trove, eclipsing the NSA. Yeah, it turns out that the DEA and the war on drugs, I would say the war of drugs, has been attacking the American people and the Bill of Rights up until the point we had the war of terrorism. And it's now the DEA, they're finding out, was doing far more spying on America than even the NSA. So this is revelation that's coming out, and this is something, of course, that Obama doesn't want us thinking about. He also doesn't want us thinking about the fact that the IRS is continuing to hound Tea Party patriots. This is something that was reported by the Washington Times. IRS continues to hound Tea Party patriots, demands even more data for tax-exempt status. So they've got their enemies list just like Richard Nixon did. They're breaking the law. They're violating the Constitution. They're not just eavesdropping or breaking in on the Democratic headquarters. They're eavesdropping and breaking in on people all over the United States, on everybody in the United States. People are upset about this. Foreign governments are upset about this. All of this is tied together. The lack of support, the fact that we can't get Britain, who's historically always been our ally, we can't get them to sign on to this because they distrust us. Even more revelations today about Brazil and Mexico being spied on by the NSA. We are spying on everyone. And now we see that, Facebook, one of the organizations, Facebook and Google, are part of the control grid. Facebook is now going to add your photo profile to facial recognition databases. Now, they've been tagging people all along. They're going to take this to a new height. So this is also something Facebook is really kind of like a training wheels for people. Gets you used to the fact that you're going to be watched. Everything that you do is going to be followed. Facebook is a wonderful tool for the system to get especially the younger generation, to not really understand the importance of privacy. And we've seen over and over again how people are burned by things they put on Facebook, but people continue to put that out there. But we're going to be taking your calls today because we're going to have, in the next segment, we're going to talk about a multiple choice quiz. We're going to talk about what really happened in Syria. There's been so many explanations put out there for what happened. We really want to know, what you think. This is a debate that we're going to have as a nation. This is something we need to keep on our elected representatives. We need to really put pressure on them. And so it's important that we have this discussion. So we're going to there's a lot of explanations that have been offered on either side, and a lot of contradicting explanations put out by the State Department and by the American regime. So we want to see what you think about that. We've got some reactions in Congress. Of course, Peter King, former Homeland Security Chairman, is absolutely horrified that Obama would not go to war, that he would actually even consult with Congress. He said, President Obama is abdicating his responsibility as commander-in-chief, and he is undermining the authority of future presidents. He said the president doesn't need 535 members of Congress to enforce his own red line. Well, Peter King, have you even read the Constitution that you swore to? Or is it like those bills that you sign all the time that you don't ever read? I mean, this is just amazing. We need to get rid of Peter King in New York. We need to get rid of Lindsey Graham in South Carolina, and he's got some competition coming up in South Carolina. I just hope it's not so many people running against him that they dilute each other and get him reelected. Now, we've also got Mike Rogers, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and he's the fellow who pushes for CISPA all the time. And he says, this is really about the credibility of the United States of America. Standing up for anti-proliferation and the use of chemical and biological weapons, it's that serious. You see, it's about our credibility. We drew a line in the sand, and we have to stand by that line. It's kind of like the bully. When the bully draws a line in the sand and you cross that line, he's got to do something about it. And that's really the overarching justification that John Kerry and Obama and Mike Rogers and Peter King, and do you notice how it's always the people who are always against due process, who are always for the police and surveillance state, the Peter Kings, the Mike Rogers, the Lindsey Grahams, and the John McCains, they're always for war as well, right? It's war and the police state. It's always the same people on the wrong side of all these vital issues. But we do have some people on the other side. Justin Amash said, it's unfortunate that it's gotten to the point where I have to thank the president for following the Constitution and the law. And then he goes on to say, President Obama hasn't come close to justifying war in Syria. I look forward to this debate. The president must comply with a vote of Congress. That is not optional. Well, good for Justin Amash. He's, of course, a congressman from Michigan. And then Rand Paul had a great statement yesterday on Meet the Press. He said, how can you ask a man to be the first one to die for a mistake? And of course, that's a paraphrase from John Kerry. John Kerry had said famously at the end of the Vietnam War, he said, how do you ask a man to be the last one to die for a mistake? And he's now on the side of asking someone to be the first one to die for a mistake. Now, do we have that clip ready for of Rand Paul? Yeah, let's take a look at what Rand Paul said that's not getting as much coverage about this whole thing about the red line. Go ahead and play that.
So it seems to me, Senator, that what the president is saying in this drafted resolution that he'd like Congress to authorize, that the United States must draw a line at the use of chemical weapons, any weapons of mass destruction in war, that you simply cannot allow it, and that if we strike Assad and he uses them again, I heard Secretary Kerry say that the United States might strike Assad again if he uses the weapons. Why not draw that line in the sand, as the president wants you to, and say, we can't allow WMD to be used?
I think the line in the sand should be that America gets involved when American interests are threatened. I don't see American interests involved on either side of this Syrian war. I see Assad, who has protected Christians for a number of decades, and then I see the Islamic rebels on the other side who have been attacking Christians. I see.
All right, that's good. We're coming up to break. That's really important. It's like, don't draw a line in a stupid place and then back yourself into a corner where you've got to go to war and you've got to kill people. We're going to be right back, and we're going to take your calls.
Those curious.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight filling in for Alex, but Alex is going to be joining us at the midpoint of the show. He's going to be joining us at about 12:30 Central Time, and he's going to be talking about the major sea change that we've seen happen in just the last week. You know, people are not just talking about false flags. We've got Ron Paul, we've got Buchanan, Pat Buchanan, people talking about false flags. Everyone is aware of this after the Boston bombing. We've also got a public that is rejecting the war narrative. 90% of the public is rejecting that. You know, when Bush put out his narrative, he had 70% in favor. Now there's 90% oppose. A huge, huge change. And that's because of InfoWars and the alternative media that's happening. We've got soldiers and sailors everywhere holding up signs saying they're not going to go fight and die in a Syrian civil war on the side of al-Qaeda. And that's exactly what's happening. They know exactly what's happening. But we still have an administration that says that they have drawn this red line. They are going to stand on this, that our credibility is on the line. It's not our credibility. It's the Obama regime's credibility. It's not the American credibility. You know, America and the Obama regime lost their credibility with everybody, with the NSA leaks and with all the other lies that they told about about the Iraq War that happened, the second Iraq War, the lying narrative about that. And just before the break, we had Rand Paul was on Meet the Press yesterday with David Gregory, and you heard the questions that David Gregory just asked him. Basically, David Gregory was essentially being a sycophant for the Obama administration, towing this line that, well, we have to do something now because the red line's been drawn, and saying what Peter King has said, oh, this diminishes the presidency. Well, let's hope so, because the presidency has started acting like a dictatorship. In Libya as well as in Syria, he's assuming that he can just go in and invade countries, just like he goes and kills individuals in foreign countries with his drone strikes, kills American citizens without due process with his drone strikes. Let's continue with this reply from Rand Paul, because he really pushes back against this ridiculous idea that because Obama drew a red line, now the credibility of the United States is at stake.
I think the line in the sand should be that America gets involved when American interests are threatened. I don't see American interests involved on either side of this Syrian war. I see Assad, who has protected Christians for a number of decades, and then I see the Islamic rebels on the other side who have been attacking Christians. I see al-Qaeda on one side, the side we would go in to support, and I see it to be murky, and I don't see a clear-cut American interest. I don't see either party that is victorious, if either party is victorious, being an American ally.
You are a United States Senator.
That's good.
You may.
That's good. Let's leave that right there. Excellent point. You know, you don't draw a red line in the sand and then say, if you cross that, we're going to go to war for you. Now, they're trying to make this a humanitarian mission, right? They're always trying to say that we're going to rescue somebody. How is launching cruise missiles into a country going to save it? It's just going to kill more people. And the people understand that. There's been a massive exodus of refugees out of Syria. They know what's going to happen. When we saw this buildup on Friday night, when it looked like Obama was going to announce on Saturday that he was going to launch the missiles and was going to launch the missiles because he was sending in a tremendous armada off the coast of Syria. Everything was prepared. We had reports at the end of the week that bombers were on their way to the Middle East. So it looked like they were going to launch an attack. And CNN was part of that. CNN was building that up. CNN was running this narrative talking about how Obama was tired of war, but he had to do this for humanitarian reasons. Then they started talking about how they were going to do surgical strikes. They started talking about how accurate the bombs were. Give me a break. I mean, look at the drone strikes that Obama is doing all the time. Are those surgical? Are those accurate? Yeah, he killed some more people this weekend. He killed 6 in Yemen. I think that was on Friday. Then on Saturday, he killed another 4 in Pakistan, he says. We don't know how many other people were killed, how many other innocent bystanders were killed. You know, this has gone into the thousands. Lindsey Graham was bragging about how it was over 4,000 people that the United States had killed with drone strikes. And, of course, there was the famous drone strike against an American who did not have due process, and that's the problem. Just as we pointed out before in the last segment, when you have people like Peter King, people like Mike Rogers who are pushing for the police state, pushing for the surveillance state, and pushing for war, do you think that they're going to be concerned when that same kind of activity comes back to America? If they don't see these other people as human beings in other countries, if they can kill them with impunity, they think, they're going to do that here as well. It's the same people who have nothing but contempt for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights who are the biggest warmongers, and they are going to attack American citizens. Mark our word on this. We're going to be right back right after the break. We're going to take your calls at 800-259-9231. 800-259-9231. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex Jones on this Labor Day, 2013. And we had amazing news that we're talking about, and that is Obama, the Obama regime. I'm not going to call them an administration. If they call other governments regimes, we'll call them a regime, and we'll call them a regime until they start following the Constitution. Then there'll be an administration. Then there'll be somebody who is actually being a faithful steward as opposed to usurpers. But until they do that, we're going to call them the regime. The Obama regime blinked this weekend and said that they're going to try to get the Congress to approve striking Syria. Now, they subsequently leaked that the State Department senior officials leaked to Fox News that they intend to strike anyway. We'll see what happens about that. But, you know, a lot of the people in the Republican Party, I think they're counting on war hawks in the Republican Party to side with them, and I think they're going to pull strings as far as party loyalty for the Democrats. But, you know, there was resistance in both the Democrats and the Republicans to this. They were sending letters demanding that John Boehner call them back to session so they could have a vote. They were sending letters to Obama. You had Democrats who were coming out against the Democrat Party leadership. You had Republicans who were coming out against the Republican Party leadership. It's not the leadership in these two parties. It's the congressmen and the senators who are lower down that are having a problem with this. But, of course, they're going to try to count on party loyalty of the Democrats, and they're going to try to count on knee-jerk militarism and warmongering that's evident in a lot of the Republican Party. But for the Republicans, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the cost. As one person put on Facebook, $1.5 million per missile to shoot at Syria, yet we don't have the money to open the White House tours or to serve our troops hot meals? That's right. According to Roll Call, a cruise missile strike against Syria could cost the Pentagon, not the Pentagon, American taxpayers. It could cost the American taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars in weapons. The first few weeks of the Libyan operation cost the United States about $600 million. See, that's the real cause of this war. The real cause of this war is to make money for the military-industrial complex. And, of course, the bankers profit from this, too. They don't profit if the stock market doesn't go up or down, but they always make money when it changes. So if it goes down, they make money. If it goes up, they make money, especially if they're the ones who know that they're driving it up or know that they're going to drive it down. That's what this is about. This is about the military-industrial complex. This is about bankers who make their fortunes off of war. That's why they were originally called warmongers. You know, mongers were people who sold things, like a fishmonger sold fish or a fleshmonger sold people. He was a prostitute. A warmonger was somebody who sold war. They don't just support action. They're selling war. It's a financial exchange here for the real masters who are running this government, the real corporatists who are running this government. But I want to go to a clip right now from that played on MSNBC over the weekend. They had a panel, and one person on the panel was not trying to justify war. This was Hillary Mann Leverett of the American University, and she's a former Bush administration person now working at the university, and this is what she had to say.
It is strikingly similar to the lead up to the war in Iraq. I was in the Bush administration, in the Bush White House, dealing also with congressional Democrats and with members of the media, with the New York Times, with NBC. The herd mentality that took over to buy into the Bush administration's narrative that Saddam Hussein had to have chemical weapons and weapons of mass destruction, he was determined to use them against us, was something unquestioned. I remember going with a key member of the Bush national security team to see President Clinton, and he putting his arm around her, telling her not only was the intel right, but she was doing the right thing morally. It was not only a mistake, it was based on manufactured evidence. Here, nobody is asking this basic question except for our friends in Moscow. What if Assad didn't order this? What if this wasn't a Syrian troop chemical attack? What if this was perpetrated by Al-Qaeda affiliated oppositionists? The consequences here for going into Syria are even more grave than Iraq. Because if we go into Syria and we degrade and we weaken Assad to the extent that Jabhat al-Nusra and the other Al-Qaeda affiliated oppositionists get away with mass chemical warfare, if that's what happened, and we think they're going to stop there, that's the definition of insanity.
When you know, that's because
That's good. Let's leave it right there. She knows her stuff. She went on to say, because this is one of the scenarios that the government, that the White House has put out, talking about how they had intercepted battle plans over the phone. And she pushed back against that in that interview. You really need to see that entire interview. It's too long for us to play here. But she said the Syrian government doesn't do its battle plans over the phone. I mean, this is just ridiculous. And everybody knows that the narrative that the White House is putting out is ridiculous. If you go to the White House website, they have a file there. It's called Government Assessment of the Syrian Government's Use of Chemical Weapons on August 21st, 2013. We've got a shot of it right up there on the screen if you're watching. And in this, they basically make their case. And I want to go through and look at some of the arguments, some of the absurd arguments that that our regime is making in terms of trying to get us involved in the Syrian civil war on the side of Al-Qaeda. The first thing that they say in there is that we have identified 100 videos that were attributed to the attack, many of which show large number of bodies exhibiting physical signs consistent with but not unique to nerve agent exposure. They go on to say, we assess that the Syrian opposition does not have the capability to fabricate all these videos. So there you go. It's the YouTube argument that, you know, we've seen all these videos, so you know, we've seen people who appear to be dying, who appear to be suffering. We don't know what it's from. There's some people who've even questioned whether or not that is real or whether or not that is staged. And yet, because we see people dying, and there's a lot of evidence that people did actually die, but we don't know what from. We don't know who did it. But that's a reason for us to get involved. And as Kerry later said, it doesn't matter who did it. We need to get involved because there's sarin gas there. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Further down in the same document, here's U.S. Version B of what they want to do. And we'll have a multiple choice question here for people where they tell us which one of these things they buy. They say they intercepted intelligence, and that's what we just said from Hillary Mann Leverett, that they don't send their plans out by phone. But in this particular one, they're essentially saying that they have intelligence that leads us to assess that Syrian chemical weapons personnel were preparing chemical munitions prior to the attack 3 days prior to the attack, we collected streams of human signals and geospatial intelligence that reveal regime activities that we assess were associated with preparations for a chemical weapons attack. Now, this was something that was leaked by Foreign Policy on Friday. Actually, I think it came out on Saturday. And the question that first came up in everybody's minds was that if they had this information, and they said that they had it 3 days ahead of time, that they had all this intelligence that they had intercepted and that they observed, and they saw people moving, they knew gas masks were being put out by the Syrians. Well, the question people are asking is, why didn't you tell anybody in these towns? They were very specific about where they saw this. They said, and this is the White House statement, Syrian chemical weapon personnel were operating in the Damascus suburb of Adra from Sunday, August 18 until early the next morning on Wednesday, August 21st. So they're saying for 3 days they were observing this, and yet they didn't tell anybody there. So you have Razan Zaitouneh, an opposition activist in the town of Duma, one of the towns hit in the August 21st attack, according to Foreign Policy, said that she had no indication of a major chemical attack. She said, when it hit, we thought it was unusual and limited, not strong. And it's unbelievable that they would not warn people or try to stop the regime. See, that's the very, if that is true, if what the White House is saying is true here, they're admitting that they did a false flag. See, a false flag is not necessarily staging or planning or creating the attack. That can be a false flag. A false flag can also be if you understand that somebody else is going to do it and you keep it secret because you're going to use that for political purposes. So if the United States government, if what they said in the White House document here, that they knew 3 days in advance is true, then they're guilty of not only allowing these people to die because they didn't do anything, but also using it as a false flag. Then we have the Israeli version, and this is also referenced in the White House report. The Israeli version says that they have evidence that incriminates the Assad regime because they intercepted communications by U.S. intelligence, by Israeli intelligence that indicated that some lower-level people shot this, and there was a lot of chatter from higher-ups saying, what are you doing? Confusion, telling them to stand down. So they said, well, it looks like it was done by somebody at a low level, not by the Assad regime, but of course, they're responsible for everything that people lower down do. Unlike the Obama administration, right? They're not responsible for anything that happens at the IRS or in these other agencies, any other rogue actions that are taken with Fast and Furious. None of that ever goes back to this administration. And that is also referenced in the White House report. That contradicts the first report, right? The first report says, oh, we have information that this is being planned 3 days in advance. Then they come in and they pull in the Israeli quote-unquote intelligence, which says, oh, this was accidentally done by somebody at a lower level. Was it an accident or was it planned? Well, the White House regime wants to tell us it was both, okay? Then we have a report that was exclusive from InfoWars, where we have an AP, NPR, BBC correspondent, someone who's done reports for all those organizations, a very credible correspondent, Dale Gavlik. She went to the area and she interviewed villagers there. What they told her was that the Saudis had given them weapons of mass destruction. They weren't sure that they didn't know that these were chemical weapons. They didn't know how to handle them. These people were telling this reporter that it was an accidental discharge. Yet another version. Final version we're going to go over, and that is hacked emails. Now, this just surfaced yesterday. We have someone who hacked into the email accounts of an Army intelligence colonel, an Anthony, let's see, what's his name here? Anthony J. McDonald. And he has a LinkedIn account, and when I went to verify that, his LinkedIn account has been removed now, but it's been cached. And you can see his cached account if you look him up on YouTube, and you can see that, yes, indeed, he was involved with the Defense Intelligence Agency at a very high level. He was in Afghanistan. He was involved in counterintelligence. He was involved in human intelligence. And what this hacker came up with were some emails that were very incriminating. What he had was some correspondence between Colonel McDonald and a person named Eugene First. And in this correspondence, Eugene writes to the colonel and says, by the way, I saw your latest success. My congratulations. Good job. And he links this article from the Washington Post, which says that Syrian activists are accusing the government of deadly chemical attack near Damascus. Now, that was the article from August the 21st. In that article, there was nothing about any kind of PR. I don't know why he would be congratulating him on this. This is simply stating what they knew at the time, that there had been a gas attack. What they believed at the time was a gas attack, that chemical weapons had been launched in the Damascus suburb. It was a very matter-of-fact, dry statement, a news report, and it said that some people were blaming it on Syrian rebels. If confirmed, use of toxic agents would be the most serious in decade, that sort of thing. This was the August the 21st report from the Washington Post. So this person writes this colonel and says, by the way, I saw your latest success. My congratulations, good job. He replies to the colonel, he says, as you see, I'm far from this now, but I know our guys did their best. So there was nothing in that article about Americans doing anything. There was nothing in that article about Americans characterizing anything or doing any research or being present there. He says, I enjoy catching up with you. Hope to see you again soon. That's very, very suspicious. Then combine that with an email from his wife, who is corresponding. He also hacked into some email accounts from his wife. She's corresponding to a friend. And in this particular case, what she says is, this friend is writing her, and there's a lot of personal information. And at the end, she says, you know, I can't stop thinking about that terrible gas attack in Syria now. Did you see those kids? I was really crying. They were poisoned. They died. When is it over? I can see their faces when I sleep. What did Tony say to you about this? And she writes back and she says, I saw it and I got very afraid. I got afraid very much. But Tony comforted me. He said the kids weren't hurt. It was done for the cameras. Hear that? Her colonel, who is an Army counterintelligence in Afghanistan, very high level colonel. He's been in for quite a while. If you look at his resume that you can still see on LinkedIn, he's very well connected. He said the kids weren't hurt. It was done for the cameras. So don't worry, my dear. Then a follow-up message from her friend that says, you see, I'm still thinking about those Syrian kids. Thank God they're alive. I hope they got some kind of a present or some cash. Wow. That's interesting. Okay, let's take some phone calls. Let's go to Chris in Georgia. Chris, what do you think of this? What's your what do you think about this Syrian attack?
Hi, you guys are doing a great job. I got to say, though, someone on the show, you have to have a good discussion about Zionism. And I'm not one of those that say it's time to pack up Israel and send everyone back to Poland and Russia. I don't think like that. It's just that the historical antecedents of the creation of Israel are much more important to this than a lot of your listeners may realize. That's one reason, but then also the other reason to have this discussion is because there are a lot of people that are wondering about Alex's treatment of Israel, if you know what I mean. And it would really behoove the show to have one good long hour discussion on that subject. The pros and cons, the difference between Zionism and Judaism, because they're absolutely not the same thing.
Right, I understand. And I can tell you from here that, you know, I've been here a year, and this is we're not shills for Zionists, anything but. And, you know, Zionism is something that, you know, there's a lot of people who are fundamentalist Christians, who are born-again Christians, who are people who believe they're taking the Bible literally, and they basically want to give a blank check to anything that the government of Israel does. And, you know, here at InfoWars, we don't, just because we're pushing back on this war in Syria, doesn't mean we're siding with the Syrians. And as I mentioned just here, this intelligence that we got from Israel, I don't find that at all credible. So yes, there's a difference between the Israeli government and between Judaism. We understand that. We'll be right back right after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show on this Labor Day. Alex is going to be joining us at the midpoint of the show at about 12:30 Central Time. And he's going to have a special report about the sea change that is happening. This is dramatic what happened last week. The British Parliament rejected the Prime Minister for the first time in a couple of hundred years, and we had Obama blink and say he's actually going to talk to Congress. This is something that we saw Panetta with Senator Jeff Sessions just say, well, we're not going to, it's a confirmation hearing, say we're not going to bother to get congressional approval. We may talk to NATO, we may talk to UN, but we don't really need to get congressional approval. And then you had the same thing happen with John Kerry during his confirmation hearings from Rand Paul. Rand Paul asked him these questions. And of course, the president can call up the military if the United States is attacked or if there is an imminent attack. That is not the case. What they're trying to do is make a case for us to get involved in a Syrian civil war on the side of al-Qaeda, and you've got people in the military pushing back all over social media. So Alex Jones is going to be in at the bottom of the next hour, and he's going to be talking about this major sea change and the danger that is involved, because the government at this point, they are losing so badly, losing the narrative so badly, they may in fact do a big false flag. They may do something here to try to win public support as a last resort. Now, the sponsor for this hour is Simply Safe. One of the things you need to be sure of is that you don't ever sign a contract for a freebie alarm. Get the best home security in America and save thousands with friends at Simply Safe. There's no long-term contracts, no hidden fees, and you get a 24/7 protection for less than $15 a month. And get a special discount plus a keychain remote, a $25 gift for free. Just visit simplysafe.com. Get simplysafe.com. That's SIMPLY safe.com. Now, we've got some of your calls lined up here, and in the last segment, we talked about all the different things that we're being fed by the White House. They've got several different versions, several different narratives. They contradict themselves. One of the narratives that they have is, well, we knew 3 days in advance that they were going to attack, yet they didn't tell anybody. They didn't do anything to stop anyone. Then they further go down, and then they say that they got intelligence from the Israelis that said that this was an accident at a lower level. So those two contradict each other. We also have information, firsthand report from a AP, NPR, BBC correspondent, Dale Gavlik, that we've carried here exclusively at InfoWars. Not too many people have picked this up, but she actually went in and talked to people. They believe that it was nerve gas that was supplied to them by the Saudis. They did not know what was in the armaments. They didn't know how to handle them properly, and they accidentally exploded. And then we have another version that it was actually a staged version, it appears, from correspondents and hacked emails from a high-ranking Army Colonel Anthony McDonald. So we want to go to your calls and see what you think. Which one of these, multiple choice, which one of these is the reason for us to go to war? And do you think we ought to go to war if you believe these are true, or as James Clapper would say, the least untruthful of these? Which of these do you think is the least untruthful? Bill in California.
Hello. It is sure a pleasure to have a sane man behind the microphone. But I'd have to say none of the above as far as the reasons go.
That's what
we don't know what the reason is. Somebody leaned on both England, France, and America to do it, but we don't know. It's time to get more pressure on our elected representatives.
That's right. Well, we're coming up.
In the crosshairs.
I agree. We're coming up to the break. Sorry, but that's a vote for none of the above, and we're going to take some more calls on the other side of the hour. Be right back at InfoWars for Alex Jones, and he's going to be joining us at the bottom of the hour. To the Alex Jones Show on this Labor Day 2013, and the news is all about Syria and about the sea change that we see happening. People have had enough of the false narrative. You know, it's changed from 70% in favor of the Iraq War, which was, now we know, based on lies and twisted intelligence. And the American public has basically woken up to that, thanks to InfoWars and the alternative media. Today, it is 90% against. A complete change from 70% for to 90% against. And that 70% was BS. That was before Snowden. But of course, it wasn't, this didn't all just happen with Snowden. What that did was that validated and verified what InfoWars and others in the alternative media have been telling the public about our criminal government violating the Constitution. You know, it was right after September 11th in 2001 that you had 4 NSA employees become whistleblowers and talk about the fact that the government was going to a broad-based surveillance of the American public. And they fought against the government doing that. They went through proper channels, but they were still persecuted by the government. One of them was prosecuted, but beat that prosecution. But that narrative never got any attention. Finally, when Ed Snowden did it, that got attention. But it verified what we've been telling everybody even before those whistleblowers came out. It was clear what was happening. People have had indications that the government has been spying on all of our communications going back for decades. But it just keeps building. And with the Snowden affair, it got really large. And there's an image that's just come out. It's on the Daily Mail. The image John Kerry won't want you to see. The U.S. Secretary of State pictured dining with Assad and his wife at a Damascus restaurant before the war broke out in Syria. Yes, this is the man, as they point out, that John Kerry this last weekend characterized as being the same as Adolf Hitler and Saddam Hussein. We see him dining with that same individual. It's kind of like, remember al-Awlaki, the American citizen who was killed by a drone attack without a trial, without being convicted of anything. He was someone who repeatedly was giving presentations at the Pentagon, who was actually a CIA agent, like most of al-Qaeda. And yet he was shot down with a drone, and his teenage son, who was never involved in anything, was shot with a drone. There wasn't any imminent danger to the United States from him. He was essentially someone who was involved in the writing area, in the propaganda area, if you will, of al-Qaeda. He was not a arm-carrying troop, but they shot and killed him, just as Obama killed 3 on Saturday and 6 on Friday. Al-Qaeda, presumably. We don't have any word yet how many innocent people were killed with those drone strikes. I guess those Al-Qaeda were bad Al-Qaeda, unlike the good Al-Qaeda in Syria. I guess those were AWOL Al-Qaeda. They were Al-Qaeda without leave. They were not where they were supposed to be, which is in Syria, fighting the regime that used to be our best buddies. Just looks more and more like Iraq all the time, doesn't it? And we had someone who was in the Bush administration who pointed that out on MSNBC. We played a clip in the last hour, and she was making the case how this looks more and more like what happened in the buildup to war. Well, we've got some callers on the line, and we want to hear what you have to say about this, but we're going to come to that right after the break because we don't have too much time here. We do have breaking news going on. It's not just the NSA that's spying on people. We have the DEA, and it is eclipsing the NSA, according to the New York Times. It is dwarfing anything that they did. And of course, it's these kind of scandals, the continuing harassment of the IRS, which is reported on, that's what needs to be covered up. That's the real basis for this. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex on this Labor Day. But Alex will be joining us at the bottom of the hour, and he's got a special report on the major sea change that is happening. And we've got an article up on Infowars.com. This is actually something that was from Ben Swann, and we've got some protesters who are out protesting the war. They've got Ben Swann signs. They've also got Infowars T-shirts. Take a look at this. If you're watching on this, let's run that video. I don't think we really need to get the audio on it. They're out there protesting, and what makes this newsworthy, I guess, is that they get approached by a policeman who tells them that they don't have a permit to protest. And the protesters not only know what's going on in Syria, but they know their rights. And they said, we have a permit. It's in the Constitution. right to peacefully assemble. There you go. You got a cop there. You got a guy with an InfoWars shirt. You got another guy holding up a Ben Swan sign. This is about the alternative media waking people up. This is the sea change that is happening. This is what Alex Jones is going to be talking about at the bottom of the hour. People are waking up. These are not a bunch of college kids with time on their hands like you saw in the 1960s. These are what we, for lack of a better term, would call middle-class Americans who are out on their weekends protesting the war because they oppose it on so many different levels, on moral levels, on at a legal level. It violates the Constitution. Even on a fiscal level. Here we're told that the U.S. is bankrupt. We're having to borrow money from China so we can launch missiles into Syria. Is this crazy? This is absolutely insane. This is going to be hundreds of millions of dollars for this so-called surgical strike that's going to kill a lot of people, a lot more people than they're claiming were killed in the Syrian attack. And, you know, even that was phony. They referred to the statistics from Doctors Without Borders, and the Doctors Without Borders pushed back on this and said, all we did was say that the videos that we saw showed signs that were consistent with a neurotoxin attack. And the casualty figure that they came up with was 355. But what they said the U.S. regime did was went through and cherry-picked information out of that report. That's what they objected to. They cherry-picked information out of that. They spun it. Then they went with a really high casualty figure of over 1,400 that was being supplied to them by the rebels. And the Red Cross is pushing back against this false narrative, too. Everybody is aware of the tactics that the American government is using, and they don't change. We've talked about how with false flags, they're always running drills when they do it in the U.S., like they did in the Boston Marathon. They're always running drills. They're always that gives them cover in case they get caught. It also creates confusion because people don't know if it's real or if it's a false flag attack or if it's just a drill. So they do certain things like that with these false flags. They have a MO, a method of operation that they do over and over again. When they want to start a war, they have the same sort of little MO. They go in and claim that they've got to come in for humanitarian reasons because babies have been pulled out of incubators or because there's been a gas attack or whatever, or the regime that they're going after has weapons of mass destruction. They always use the same type of template. It's just a cutout thing. And then we find out later that this is this woman who's talking and crying in congressional testimony about babies being taken out of incubators, that she's the daughter of an ambassador, that she wasn't there. We find out that the weapons of mass destruction didn't exist, that they twisted that narrative. We're finding out similar things with this as well. When you look at the White House document, their justification for war, they even contradict themselves. At one point in the document, they say that it's because they had intelligence 3 days ahead of time that the administration was planning this. Then they refer to some intelligence that came from the Israeli government that says that, no, in fact, we got intelligence that the administration was surprised that this happened. And we heard phone calls where they were going back and saying, what are you doing? Stand down. So they even contradict themselves in that phony narrative. They talk about how, well, they know this is for real because they have so many YouTube videos that they saw of it. And, of course, the Syrians couldn't fake YouTube videos. But then we have an email that was hacked from a high-ranking military colonel in the U.S. Army, an Anthony McDonald, and this hacker got in through his LinkedIn account. You can still see his LinkedIn account cached on Google, and you can see that he was, in fact, a very high-level intelligence officer in Afghanistan, working in counterintelligence, working in human intelligence, and there's a series of emails between him and someone else that essentially make this look like it was a false flag. Makes it look like it was staged. An email from a friend of his wife's to his wife said she was really, really upset about the pictures that she saw of the children dying, and the wife of this colonel says, don't worry, he told me it was all staged, that nobody died. And the other one says, oh, I'm so glad and relieved to hear that. I hope they got some prizes or some cash for that. So that is a real eye-opener. That just broke yesterday. So we want to take your calls, and we've got some people here on the line, and I'd like to know what you think. I mean, is this something that was totally faked by the United States government? Was this something that was organized by the United States government and the rebels, or organized by the rebels and the Saudis, for example? Or did the Americans know that this was going to happen, allow it to happen, so they could use it for the military-industrial complex, creating another war? Or were they right all along? Was it really the Syrian government? Did they really say, you know what, we're winning on the battlefield, so let's just, for the heck of it, let's just drop some bombs because then we know the Americans will attack us and it'll get a little bit more interesting and more challenging. Ed in New York, what do you think? Which of those you think is, as James Clapper would say, the least untruthful? Which of those you think is? Ed in New York, are you there? I think we lost Ed in New York. Let's go to Lauren in Ohio.
Sorry.
Oh, Ed, you're there. Okay.
Ed, New York. Let's go to Lauren in
Ed.
Ohio. Oh, Ed, you're there. Okay.
I think we're getting some feedback on your radio. Do you have that turned on?
Sorry, I had a little bit of feedback from the Prisonplanet TV.
Okay.
Sorry, can you rephrase the question again, sir?
Yeah. Which of those do you think is least untruthful? Do you think that the U.S. government faked it? Do you think they aided it? Do you think that the Syrians actually did it?
I believe that they, I think it's like in the middle. I think they, that they aided it. They didn't actually carry out the attack, although I wouldn't put anything past the CIA these days or the Mossad. But obviously, one of the questions that the judges used to ask in Rome was cui bono, which means who benefits. So
yes.
When you want to see, if you want to understand the motivations, you want to understand who was really behind or who at least would have endorsed or supported an attack like this, I would say just ask that question. It usually always leads you right to the answer.
And who do you think benefits from a war in Syria? Do you think it helps the people? You know, we're told we have to do this for humanitarian reasons. We're told that we had 1,400 people killed, so we should do a major missile strike against them to teach them a lesson. Do you think that benefits the Syrian people? Does that benefit the American people?
Sounds like propaganda, you know. Send them some peace missiles and, you know, show them your love.
That's right.
That's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard, especially when the Assad regime is far less violent and, as Rand Paul said earlier today, than the Al-Qaeda rebels could ever be. I mean, it's mind-boggling how we can be supporting the same people who attacked us on 9/11, you know?
Right. Well, but you know that CNN was running this through all on Friday when it looked like it was going to happen on Saturday. They were running this through and they were talking about what a surgical strike it was going to be, how accurate these missiles are going to be. In other words, nobody but, you know, they're going to mysteriously find all the bad guys and not hurt anybody else. Do you believe that?
No, it sounds just like those drone strikes.
Right. Even the drone strikes. I mean, they're not that big of bombs, but even the drone strikes have killed thousands of innocent people. Thousands of innocent people.
Well, yeah. Listen, I just want to let you guys know that I think you're doing a wonderful job.
Well, thank you.
Especially recently, it really helped when the NSA leaks came out, as you mentioned. You know. Just people at my job, people my age. I'm only 22 years. I'm 23 now. I'm just a waiter. I work at the catering hall out here, and I only had a couple of guys. Most of them were veterans, you know, that were bartenders that were pretty much aware of what was going on. I didn't even really get. I have to say, I unfortunately voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012. I only got into this pretty recently. The Piers Morgan interview helped a lot.
Yeah.
That's how I found Alex Jones. And
Good.
I want to tell you that the younger generation's waking up. You know, I had people come to me after the NSA leaks, and they realized I wasn't really that out of my mind.
Yeah.
And now again with this, I said it's only 90% of the American population is against war in Syria. Had a couple of my coworkers say, you know, where are you getting all this information from? It seems like it's checking out. Especially when I showed them the UN inspectors said it's at least tentative that the rebels committed attacks, and I showed them InfoWars, Natural News. I even gave them the Blaze.
You know, we have to
work out well with that, but yeah.
Exactly. We have to document our stuff so much more carefully because it's a different narrative than they're hearing from the mainstream media. If you listen to CNN, what you hear is all this stuff about how they're going to do surgical strikes. We're asking the questions like, who benefits from this, like you just mentioned. We're asking, why would we do this? Where did we get the information about this? And why are we doing this when it was only back in May that you had UN inspectors going there saying it was the rebels who used sarin gas and they did it as a false flag trying to draw the United States in.
Today?
What's that?
Was that in USA Today?
That was reported in a lot of different media. That was back in May. And we also had a former Bush administration person who was, her name was Hillary Mann Leverett, and she was pointing out the fact that what they learned when they went in and tested in May. They knew that this was not the Syrian government. These were not, the missiles that were used were not missiles that were military industrial, they were homemade missiles, as well as the sarin gas itself was homemade. And we know that that can be done homemade because that's what happened in Japan. What you were talking about, Ed, is exactly what Alex is going to be talking about. He's going to be here at the bottom of the hour. He's going to talk about the sea change that is happening as people wake up to what's going on because of InfoWars and the alternative media. We'll be right back. Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex momentarily. Alex is going to be joining us at the bottom of the hour. He's got a special report about what happened this weekend with Obama essentially backing down from striking unilaterally without congressional support, without constitutional authority. It is a sea change. It is something that we saw happening all over the world, but especially here in the U.S., because if you've noticed what's happening on the social media, we've got soldiers and sailors all over the place putting up signs saying they're not going to go get involved. They didn't enlist to get involved in a Syrian civil war and fight on the side of al-Qaeda. So Alex is going to be talking about that, talking about how people are waking up because of InfoWars and the rest of the alternative media. We're seeing people getting essentially tired and fed up of being lied to about what's going on and being manipulated by the government. We had 72% of the people who supported the Iraq war. That was a war that was based on lies. And now people have woken up to that same tactic. They're still using the very same tactic. But I want to tell you about a couple of things here. We've got our sponsor for this hour is Supernatural Silver. Antibiotics are getting ineffective because they're being overused and misused, but new Supernatural Silver offers a safe and effective means of killing pathogens where antibiotics and other drugs are failing. This is something that has been used for a very, very long time. People have known that if you put silver in wounds, you can kill bacteria. Silver pitchers were not just beautiful, but they had a very functional use. Supernatural Silver is a way that you can protect your family and yourself. Go to supernaturalsilver.com and use the promo code AlexSays for a 20% discount. And also we have the new InfoWars magazine, which just came out. This is, the cover is really appropriate. It's Obama. It says, "Thou shalt not have any other gods above the state." And in so many ways, that is true. Take a look at this recent story. This is something that is happening right now that illustrates that essentially. This is a German homeschool family. And that really is the attitude in Germany. They want to get the children at a very early age. Government schooling essentially was pioneered in Germany, kindergarten. That sort of thing has been there for centuries. It's thoroughly ingrained. And of course, when the Nazis took over, all they had to do was to change the curriculum. So as long as you've got a government infrastructure there to brainwash children at an early age, the government can use that any way that they see fit. And so the German government and even other governments in Sweden are very, very intolerant, very authoritarian of anybody who wants to take their children out of school. And of course, what they're having a conflict with are Christians in those schools because they don't like the religion that's being taught in the schools. That's right. The schools are not just secular. They are teaching a religion. Atheism and secularism is a religion. It's not a question of whether religion is going to be taught. It's not a question of whose values or whether or not values are going to be taught. It's just a question of which religion and whose values are going to be taught. And so what you had was simply a family in Germany, the Romeke family, that wanted to homeschool their children, and they were threatened with having their children taken away. They escaped from Germany, came to the United States, were given asylum in Tennessee by a judge in 2010, and then a little over 2 years later, Homeland Security came after them. And the Holder administration, the Eric Holder's Justice Department, that regime has been trying to get them thrown out. I find it interesting that it started with Homeland Security and not with immigration. It's Homeland Security who came after these homeschoolers. And, of course, we've seen some very disturbing briefs filed on the part of Eric Holder and the Justice Department saying that freedom of religion is not a justification for them to be able to homeschool. Very, very disturbing. it doesn't really mean anything to have a First Amendment that says that we have freedom of speech and that we have freedom of religion if we don't have freedom of education, because education is about both of those issues. If you are going to say that we don't have freedom of education, you're going to be infringing on people's freedom of speech, their freedom of thought, and on the values that they're trying to teach their children. I homeschooled both of my sons, and I can tell you that they have a very different understanding of history and political science than they would if they had been taught by the government. What you see in the government schools is an education of the government, by the government, and for the government, and that's not what you're going to get at home. We're going to be right back, and Alex is going to talk about this sea change that is happening that we saw as Obama backed down. Be right back with Alex Jones. Stay tuned.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is already the second day of September 2013. I am your host, Alex Jones. David Knight is hosting most of the broadcast today. I will be here until midnight tonight on Labor Day, working on Obama Deception 2 with my great film crew, Rob Jacobson, Darren McBreen, and, of course, Rob Dube. And I want to say great job to the crew in here today, working as well on the radio side, as well as one of our InfoWars Nightly News host, David Knight. We are here Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. until 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. The information I'm about to cover is so unbelievably momentous that I want to be clear here. I do not feel worthy to bring you this information. All the facets, the depth, the breadth, the multivariate, multifaceted systems that bring me to the 100% ironclad conclusion that we are on the verge of the collapse of this current incarnation of the New World Order. Now, to be clear, there will still be the same power structures in place at many levels. To be clear, the general population of the West, because we've had so much liberty, has had incredible plenty, so we've become very, very decadent. And so the problem of general corruption and general evil will still be there. But as for the current power structure that is in place, driving the dominant global system of the three power structures that are present in the geopolitical system, the Anglo-American establishment is basically on fire, exploding, and is a ship now listing at about 90 degrees and about to go under. And I'll be honest with you, the only way they're going to be able to avert fully capsizing and then sinking and breaking up on the surface is staging false flag attacks, the order of magnitude so huge that I don't believe even that will get them out of it, because the understanding of false flag is now so widespread, so ubiquitous. As you know, in the last few months, I have made the point that when I run into military on the streets in California, in Texas, in Arkansas, in Florida, in D.C., in England, places I've been in the last year, half the military and police in many cases that I walk by wink at me and say, we're awake, we know what's going on, we're not bad. We're just waiting for the right cue to take action. And they'll say, what do you think that is? And I'll say, I don't know. And they'll say, that's why we really respect you, because you don't just sit up there and make stuff up. Let me tell you, it's very humbling. Very, very humbling to know that the armed services of the United States, a large portion of them listen to this broadcast every week. And I have talked about the fact before it came out 3 weeks ago that the Pentagon The higher level you get, the higher percentage, it's well over 50%, that listen to this broadcast every single day. And that absolutely freaks out the globalists that have hijacked our country. Now, I'm not trying to make this incredible news I'm about to cover about Infowars.com or about Alex Jones. It's a fact. And we are in the middle of it, and we also need your prayers. And contrary, to it making me become arrogant and hubris-filled, it is extremely weighting on my spirit, the responsibility we have. And when you're trying to break down something this big, it's very, very hard because there's so many facets to it. So let me just do this. Let me try to just break down what's happened, and then I'll go through and back up the information I'm going to cover. I tend to never get to my full presentations because I will focus in on each strata area of the larger program. But here's the bottom line. Humanity wants to be free. Humanity has an incredible survival instinct, and they may have dumbed it out of the general public because they've had it good for so long. They have not dumbed it out of killers. They have not dumbed it out of the military. They have not dumbed it out of the tacticians. They have not dumbed it out of the strategist. And most of the strategists and killers and tacticians and special forces type people are not evil. They have been manipulated, they have been brainwashed, and they're now decompartmentalized and aware of it, and they are not even angry. They're trying to figure out how to save this country. And that's why I've been willing to risk my name, my treasure, everything. But I quite frankly can't believe our success is so devastating. I mean, if you studied this like I do, 18 hours a day, ladies and gentlemen, when I intellectually look at this and see what's coming out of my electrochemical computer, the equations, the answers, the political sense, the gestalt that my brain and all the other intellectuals I talk to and people that study political systems, they're coming to the same conclusion as well. And again, InfoWars is a large part of this, but thank God there's many others that are prominent as well. This is a very dangerous position to be in. The New World Order is melting down right now. And the scary thing is, historically, when tyrants start losing on the Western Front, they turn east. When Napoleon starts losing in Europe, he turns into Russia. When Hitler starts losing in North Africa and against England and the U.S., he turned east into Russia. When Romans historically began to lose some of their conflicts, they'd launch even more wars. That's the instinct of bullies that have learned to dominate. Their answer is to double down. And so I want to be clear here before I get into the big news I'm breaking down. The reason we're in so much danger is because we are basically now not just in the fight against the New World Order. We've now gained the initiative. We've basically torn the nose off the globalist. They are on their knees right now, politically, seeing stars. And we have got to move in and start stomping them politically to take them out. Or, ladies and gentlemen, they're going to supercharge and open up a can of false flag on us, and we're going to be the ones on the ground. I'm telling you right now, they are looking at every angle with their supercomputers, but they're fighting on an organic supercomputer of billions of humans who want freedom. And so if we simply realize we can win and understand the battlescape and understand the political landscape, and if we go on the initiative, on the offensive, we can shape the entire future battlescape and win. We'll still have a lot of problems, but we can really cripple the globalist. Then the globalists will start funding Russia and China and letting them do horrible stuff. so they can then get us to give up our liberties again. That's why the globalists sit above the nations, playing us all off against each other. But the minute we figure that out and come together around a culture of liberty and honor and due process and anti-corruption and make the world economy about who is trustworthy, who is inventive, who builds good products, and have long-term relationships instead of the globalist gang relationship scam, the minute we rediscover that, it's over for them. So I've given you some basics here. What am I getting at? What's so big? The military is awakening to their duty. The establishment has jumped the shark. The world does not like seeing all the major militaries of the West ganged up on Syria for 2.5 years, injecting al-Qaeda in there to commit unspeakable atrocities and blow up churches and make fathers commit suicide bombings or they kill them. And the military knows this because the U.S. military is there giving intel with drones and intel with satellites to the al-Qaeda forces and being forced to train them in Jordan, Iraq, Turkey, and Israel. And so now this information is confirmed in the military. They now know our information about how criminal elements of our government have been running al-Qaeda all along. There's now a mass epiphany that has already spread viral, and there's no putting it back in the box. Even if the globalists stage new big events, the process of unwinding this propaganda, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. You have Pat Buchanan, you have Ron Paul, and now Rand Paul, all coming out saying our government's running al-Qaeda. See, I and others have made it safe for them to talk about the elephant in the room. The military's coming out en masse talking about it. This is so historical. And now, Kerry said last week, we don't need Congress. Yeah, keep going through that. Keep showing people watching on TV, all the military people saying, I will not fight for al-Qaeda in Syria, and holding up signs saying it by the thousands flooding Twitter and Facebook. We have the article up on Infowars.com. Talking to my crew here if you're a radio listener. Kerry, imagine, the globalists come out. They've been able to attack any country they want by staging attacks against our forces or staging attacks and then blaming it on their political enemies. They've gotten away with this over and over and over again. And now they tried to openly for 2.5 years use al-Qaeda in Libya, Syria, Egypt, and other areas, and now the Egyptian military has turned against them and is arresting the Muslim Brotherhood and al-Qaeda and pointing out with documents that our own criminal government has been funding them. It's all coming out. It's not just the Russians. It's not just the European press. It's our own military. Everybody is seeing it for what it is, a menace to humanity, and is turning against it. And if the globalists lose on this front, they will lose on every front. So Obama comes out Saturday, comes out yesterday as well through his surrogates like Kerry, and says, okay, we've decided we're going to strike Syria. They've already been striking them with surrogates for 2.5+ years, but we're going to go to Congress to get approval. But then he has his surrogates come out and say, Kerry yesterday, we don't need to get approval, but if you want to, fine. Just like a year ago, they said Congress wasn't over war anymore, NATO was. See, it's about reclaiming due process. And once it begins, and once these bullies have been shown to be frauds, just because they're wearing fancy suits and speaking from the Rose Garden or speaking from some gilded ivory tower, doesn't mean they're better than us. Doesn't mean they aren't kleptocratic liars. And so the veil is dropping, similar, and here's the key, to what we saw with the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. And the fall of the Soviet Union was real because they had no more support. They did try to regroup and still keep socialism and communism going. But the fall was real. It's just that they tried to regroup, so some of it was playing possum. And they'll do this again here. But the fact is, we just have a gangster, criminal, foreign banking oligarchy in control. It's playing all our nations off against each other. And one big reason everybody's turning against this 2.5-year disgusting Syria funded civil war using jihadis from Qatar and Saudi Arabia and other areas is because my mother said this last night, and I was already thinking it. It was like a psychic moment almost. I'm over at their house at night, swimming around in their pool in their hot tub with my kids and my wife. And my mother goes, you know, the reason people don't like this Syria thing, it's something I've been thinking for days but hadn't said on air. She goes, was the same reason everybody got behind Israel in the 50s and 60s and 70s, because you saw all these big nations ganged up on this little country attacking it, and everybody rooted for the underdog. I remember growing up rooting for Israel, you know, at church and all the rest of it, and seeing all these countries gang up with superior military force and, you know, cheering Israel on as Israel defeated the people that were attacking them. And again, you can take sides either way. Now I'm sophisticated enough to not take any side because I get the globalists are above it playing the countries off against each other. The Arabs, you know, say they want to kill all the Israelis, and the Israelis say, oh, let's go ahead and kill all the Arabs because it's tribal warfare. I want to end that. I want people to come together around a culture of liberty and freedom. Probably will never happen in the Middle East, but it could happen in America. That's why the globalist media is trying to divide and conquer us here. Because they don't want us to ever unify around a true culture of rediscovering what made the Western world, the Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, the flower of the Renaissance, the Enlightenment. They don't want that to come back. And so now it's safe to say the government runs al-Qaeda. Now people say false flag when no one knew what it was 10 years ago when I was using the term. It shows how we have affected history. You, my listeners, more than anybody, spreading the word, you are at the heart of this. DrudgeReport.com, pointing out the last few years that the West was funding al-Qaeda. He would link to European newspapers that were covering it before American media covered it. And Bilderberg, 2 years ago, from our sources, had meetings about how upset they were that it was out that they ran the radical Muslims and had actually been stirring them up and funding them for almost 100 years, 90-plus years. Notice how everything we've told you and how to defeat the globalists and what's happening is now coming true. Because, folks, this isn't hype. This is real what you're seeing happening right now. It's indescribably important. And I'm going to come back for 2 more segments and break this down. Then David Knight's going to come back in. And obviously tomorrow we'll be detailing this in great detail. But I've got a lot of other points I want to get to. But this total implosion of confidence in the globalist, we could see the fall of the New World Order just like the fall of the Soviet Union. May not be this week, next month, or even next year. But I'm telling you, they've set up the whole Homeland Security control grid because they knew this was coming. Ladies and gentlemen, I watch body language, not just what people say. And I made a big deal about it about 3.5 weeks ago because it was a big deal. They had about 200 top brass and the head PR flaks and PSYOP officers, civilian and military PSYOP officers, psychological warfare, at the Pentagon briefing with the Undersecretary of Defense, admitting they're engaging in domestic PSYOPs and saying the public doesn't believe us and the public is absolutely freaked out. And they had officers get up and teary-eyed, you can see tears in their eyes, say, we don't want to lie, people don't believe us anymore. And then they tried some of their PSYOPs and things to roll out domestic PSYOPs that now we're going to tell the truth because now we're going to have the CIA and Pentagon operating domestically, and everyone looked completely freaked out in the audience and were shaking their heads. And I happen to know why, and I told you why. Because I know a lot of people in the military, I'll just leave it at that. They all know our government runs al-Qaeda. They all know our government's foreign. They tried to teach it at the Army War College. They had people like Thomas Barnett in the last decade give courses how our military now works for the New World Order and globalism, and they tried to hide it in plain view. And the new Army manuals came out and badmouthed George Washington and the Founding Fathers. We showed that last week. It was a big national news story. That's not even a classified Army manual. All officers, including non-commissioned sergeants and up, folks, are given that. Bad-mouthing the Founding Fathers. People think this is a joke. Then they're told, no, soldier, George Washington is bad. He wouldn't be welcome in our military. They all know he was the first member of the U.S. Army. They all know that's treason. These people jumped the shark. They thought we would get behind al-Qaeda publicly. Publicly. They tried to assassinate my character forever, exposing that. Didn't work. I didn't care because I said I was here to hit the barbed wire, folks. I was here to hit the barbed wire so it was safe for Ron Paul and safe for Pat Buchanan. I told you this hundreds of times because I understand warfare, ladies and gentlemen, and I understand the truth is a weapon, and I use it every day. And I will go up against the dragon. And ladies and gentlemen, you need to go up against it as well. And the minute you make the decision to reclaim your honor, I don't care if you're in the military, the government, a private citizen, whatever it is, the minute you admit you haven't taken action against this and that you're going to do something every day is the minute you're going to start living, the minute God's going to start smiling at you, and the minute we're going to really turn this around. Because with the minority of us speaking out and taking action, the globalists are in full-fledged panic. And here's the scary news. My gut tells me nerve gas attack, bio attack, or nuke in the Western world, I'll guarantee you it's being thought about right now by the globalists. They didn't get in charge for being shrinking violence. They're bold, and their fortune's evil and tyranny, and fortune favors the bold, and they know that. So we better be bold. Our fortune's liberty for our children and for our own lives. Let's go out to break here, a clip of Pat Buchanan on Newsmax Friday. The story's up on Infowars.com.
John, this has Tonkin Gulf written all over it. We're putting the United States now militarily into a war where our side has al-Nusra folks, al-Qaeda people, jihadis on its side. The war there is being lost. We have no plans to win it. We have no plans to end it. We have no plans to get out. You are right. It's a Sunni-Shia war throughout the entire Middle East.
Okay, folks, we're gonna come back. And that's him on the McLaughlin group. There's another clip of him on Newsmax where he says, this has false flag written all over it. And then we've got Ron Paul. Then we've got Rand Paul. We've got it all. And then David Knight is coming up with your phone calls. Everybody out there listening. But this is historic. But the empire may strike back, so get the word out right now. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, history is happening right now. And the military is waking up in mass, saying, I will not fight for al-Qaeda. The globalists say, oh, we're going to torture to see if we'll go along with that. Or, oh, we're going to secretly arrest citizens to see if we'll go along with that. And every time they get public backlash, they then back off and say, we never said that. They play mind games with us to make us feel powerless. But we're now discovering that we do have power. And now Kerry vows Obama will violate Constitution ahead of Syria group meeting. But again, the big victory is they were going to attack. They said they didn't need congressional approval. Now they're going to get it because they're afraid. These criminals always get committees to agree. Large groups, so not one person can be blamed for it. They like to hedge their bets and confuse things with a bunch of legalese, just like derivatives and credit default swaps. It's the same thing with war. They get a whole bunch of different organizations like NATO and the UN and the EU and others to sign on. Every group to sign on except for the group that has the authority, the American people's representatives, the Congress, just as Obama said in his speech. So he acts like he's going to obey the forms while double-crossing it at the same time. But it shows their incredible weakness. This is a big deal. Now, here's another Pat Buchanan clip with him on Newsmax just Friday.
What we should do here is, first, this thing reeks of a false flag operation. I would not understand or comprehend that Bashar al-Assad, no matter how bad a man he may be, would be so stupid as to order a chemical weapons attack on civilians in his own country, when the immediate consequence of which might be that he would be at war with the United States. So this reeks of a false flag operation.
All right. Now, Ron Paul said the same thing. Rand Paul came out and said we're on the side of al-Qaeda. It looks like the rebels may have done this. I have been here, and I didn't even realize this 15 years ago or so, but that's what I've served the purpose of moving the Overton window. And if you don't know what the Overton window is in psychology, when they try to teach 5-year-olds how to have brutal, hardcore, unhealthy sex, if they can get you to accept that, you'll accept anything. So they take you 1 trillion miles. Even if you push it back a few billion, you're still, way down the road towards tyranny. Okay, they try to normalize all their corruption. They try to normalize saying your kids belong to the state and they're going to force inoculate you and homeschooling's illegal. And then call you radical because you want basic freedom. It's the same thing with this war making. Oh, we're going to torture. Oh, we're going to fund al-Qaeda. Oh, we're going to do this, we're that. But when people finally revolt against it, it can boomerang back on them and their whole system can collapse. Because when you've ramped up an Overton window towards tyranny, if people finally switch back, the pendulum can swing so hard it flies out the other end of the building. It can boomerang. And so I've been here to move the Overton window back to common sense, back to history. And I don't care if a bunch of extremists and weirdos and kleptocratic control freaks get up on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, talk radio, and say I'm the devil, I'm a demon, I'm a piece of trash, I'm a liar, I'm a scumbag, just all sorts of, I'm a racist. I don't care, because I am a soldier in the info war who's meant to blow a hole in their wall. And by the way, folks, we haven't just blown a hole in their wall. We've breached right through the main gate, blown out dozens of giant holes. We are now sieging the enemy emplacements in the Citadel, within the Citadel. The enemy is on fire. Now, they may try to blow something up down the road to get us to run and fight that or whatever, but the point is that the New World Order is in disarray, is in shambles, and many other analysts are saying that. Krauthammer's saying it, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts is saying it, countless others are saying it, but we said it first. I know what I'm talking about, and we are in the eye of the storm. David Knight's coming up with special reports and your calls.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and I'm joined in the studio here with Alex because this is such a big news story. We wanted to talk a little bit more about this sea change that's happening.
Absolutely. I want you to be able to get to Lauren listening on 770 in Ohio and so many others that are holding, and then we're going to get at the bottom of the hour to the very informative report that you guys have put together dealing with the protest against the war that happened here this weekend. But the main issue that I wanted to talk about here, again, for some stations that just joined us, is that folks know that I don't get on air. People have seen this time and time again. I really tell you what I believe is happening in the world. And I don't ever lie to myself about the analysis that I and others that I respect have come up with. And to understand that just with human intelligence, what I've seen on the street, about half the military are listeners. And they listen about every week or so. I've done informal surveys on the street. And now we see that coming out of the Pentagon. And I'm just one node in this overall fight. You're just one little node in this overall fight. It is just so incredibly historical to now see it be mainstream kitchen table talk. Why does our government run al-Qaeda? Right. Why does our government stage false flags? And the videos come out. And to have WorldNet Daily join us and Drudge join us. It's not just InfoWars. Mm-hmm. And to have Rand Paul and Ron Paul and Pat Buchanan. And to have the general public get it. And to be... I went to a bowling alley with my son yesterday and some friends. And I was given free bowling games and shoes. Everyone was listeners. Never been there before until this week. People came over from both sides where we were bowling were listeners. I ran into the off-duty cop that was there as security. He was a listener. I went up to get some drinks at the bar. The bartenders were listeners. And again, I'm not sitting here bragging, oh, I'm a big deal, people know who I am. No, no, no. It wouldn't matter if it was they knew who I was because I was some rapper, or I was some basketball player, or I was some football player, or I was some, reality TV star. These are people that are listeners that are like, can you believe they're running Al-Qaeda? It was the things they were saying. And it's almost like Fight Club, because a lot of times they'll just be like, it's really, this has got to, I want the people out there to know, David, that the awakening is on. And now, for the first time in 100 years, they can't launch a false flag and get away with it. And this is Soviet Union, pre-Soviet Union collapse, Romania, Ceausescu collapse level stuff. What do you say to that?
Well, just like Ed from New York was saying, when I took him, one of the callers we had last hour, he said he found you with the Piers Morgan thing. And it's the Piers Morgan thing. It's the Boston bombing that happened. When that happened, and Dan Bidandi, bless him, he got up there, and they were trying to do everything to intimidate him, to ridicule him, but he got the message out about false flags. And you saw the media running reports about, oh, what is a false flag? And, I mean, it was a brand new term.
It was the biggest story for a couple days. Well, and that's what this showed.
He got it on there, and people understood then what a false flag is. And so, and it becomes such a pervasive thing that now you've got people feel, like you said, you hit the barbed wire first, and so now it's something that people can talk about. They understand that it's there, and very few people push back on it. We just had a Salon article where they pushed back on it and said, according to false flag lore, there was the Reichstag fire, and it's like, according to lore, you don't know anything about history. You don't know about the Reichstag fire.
Tonkin.
I mean, that is exactly.
Operation Ajax.
But I mean, the Reichstag fire is like the archetype. But there's been so many, and we've documented it. Operation Gladio, all these different things, and people are understanding that now. It caused a discussion back with the Boston bombing, and we see that it's the same kind of template. They have this MO that they use over and over again when they do a domestic false flag. They've got another MO that they use when they want to invade a country, like we saw with the Iraq War about weapons of mass destruction. Now we see again with the Syrian war.
Absolutely. And so I'm not up here saying, hey, our show's big. I'm explaining this for people out there that aren't well known, who feel like they're all alone. I can't go anywhere now. Went to the hike and bike trail this morning with my dad. Ran into multiple listeners out of just 20 people we passed. I just want to give people the good news is that America and the world is awakening. Dempsey tells them, the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman, don't attack. Obama comes out and lies Friday or Saturday and says, the chairman supports me, thinks this is a good idea. The fact is that once the confidence is lost in the confidence man, once people finally understand, it's like that end scene in Facing the Crowd. That's got Andy Griffith in it or whatever, where he gets caught admitting he's a con artist, then the whole thing basically implodes. And look at all the Twitter being flooded, and people can retweet it at Real Alex Jones, these thousands of photos of military officers, but also enlisted, holding up signs saying, I will not fight on the side of Al-Qaeda in Syria. But what do you make of my point, and then I'll get out of here and go to calls, that it's the ganging up too. People instinctively get that the whole world the whole Western world is ganging up on little Syria. And I think it's the same thing that endeared people to Israel. Even though Israel wasn't perfect, no country is that the image of a little country being ganged up on, we all instinctively don't like that. Good people don't like that.
That's right. And what you said about people, kind of the pushback, the Overton window, you've got a Bush administration person who was on that MSNBC clip they played earlier. Her name is Everett, and she was saying, this is exactly what we saw. And she talks at great length to the people at MSNBC passionately about how we were lied to, how they twisted the narrative, and saying they're doing exactly the same thing. People understand that they were lied to about that. They understand that it's a template that the administration is using. They see that same template being used again. It's like, come on. I'm not falling for that again.
Well, that's it. And that's why I say it's jumping the shark.
Yeah.
It's jumping the shark to do this over and over again, and then their own jihadis are so badly coordinated, they upload videos that day of them shooting off the mortars. I mean, that's what's insane about this is they don't even try to hide it anymore. And then Obama says, I don't need Congress's authority. Then he goes, okay, I do. But then Kerry doubles back and says, but we really don't. Right. And again, they may end up being able to get their Syria attack. I think right now they won't. I even thought last week that they might, but if they did, it would be the beginning of the end for them. And I think even more intelligent members of the establishment, who aren't even good people, realize this is reckless. And the Russians are involved, the Chinese are involved, and I'm not romanticizing them, but it's been said so many times that national sovereignty is a firewall. And just as there were a lot of nations that could oppose Hitler, what if we already had a UN and Hitler could have got control of that? There would have been no opposing a global government run by Hitler. And these eugenicists basically created Hitler. They didn't run him. They created him like Frankenstein and let him out in the countryside. Pun intended, because Frankenstein's German, folks. And that's what happened. And now they've created or helped reanimate the Al-Qaeda Frankenstein. That's what they're, and then they pose as the saviors as Frankenstein runs around the village in the countryside killing people. And we're tired of this, and we don't like losing our liberties, our birthright, in the name of Al-Qaeda, while criminal elements of the government run it. And I'm telling you, there's 1,000 points is why I get so frustrated when I'm laying there in bed at night or sitting there thinking or writing notes of why this is so big. But anybody out there who's followed this, you know all those points as well. This news is so incredibly good that I feel like I just won $1 billion lottery.
Well, it's the big news Brzezinski said last week. He said there's a global awakening, and it is global.
There's another one of the data points in my notes.
Exactly.
So talk about it.
You got. Well, look at Turkey, for example, okay? Turkey last week, their parliament voted down the idea that they were going to play host to 60,000 American troops. Don't talk about this just being a surgical strike. That's not what's there.
No, this is boots on the ground.
Absolutely. Even today, when the Obama administration met with some of these congressmen who happen to be in town, they're coming back and saying, whoa, this is really broad. This is going to have to be narrowed down. This really isn't just a surgical missile strike. This is a very broad authorization. So they already, Turkey's not saying, oh, we'd like 60,000 American troops here on their own. They're already being told that by the U.S. government. That's what they'd like to preach.
Exactly. I just realized that's a huge article that you just mentioned that was buried in the news today with the Turkey saying, you know, they want more in Reuters and the New York Times. But the headline should be Obama caught lying, plans boots on the ground.
Right.
Because there's the proof.
But as part of it being a global awakening, the Turkish parliament voted it down.
Exactly.
Okay.
The British Parliament for the first time since 1782.
That's right.
And now the French want to vote.
That's right. And so the question is, the article that's up on InfoWars right now is, I think it's Paul Craig Roberts wrote it, can Obama buy off the Congress? Can the military-industrial complex that Obama represents, the corporatists that he represents, can he buy off Congress and get his war authorization?
Or blackmail them with all the NSA stuff.
Exactly. So that's the key. People need to get active. They need to hold their feet to the fire. They need to awaken their neighbors. They really need to create a firestorm. And
but see, right there is why I was so frustrated and said I got to come back in on air, even though I'm up here to work on Obama Deception 2 today. You're doing a great job. As I'm like, I didn't make all the points. And yeah, Brzezinski says the alternative media is destroying us. All hands on deck. They're exposing our false flags. All these parliaments are voting it down. It's incredible what's happening.
It really is a global awakening. And this is... Brzezinski said this. Brzezinski, the guy who was the founder of the Trilateral Commission, and the guy
he's Obama's advisor on this.
Yeah, he created Al-Qaeda in the first place. Okay, he knows how this game is played, and he's saying this game is not working anymore. They've got to come up with some kind of a new way to jimmy this. And again, the question is, are these Republicans going to fall in line because they just knee-jerk reflexively support military action?
I agree. I know you're going to break. Come back with calls. You got that report coming up. Great job, David. I'm going to go work on Obama Deception 2 up here on the holiday. God bless everybody out there. I just want to throw in here at the end that my point is we may be able to stop this, but they may do a false flag. We may not be able to stop it, but look at how the game's slowing down. We're winning more and more points. We're getting the momentum. The awakening's there. If they go ahead with this in front of everybody, it'll only blow up in their face bigger down the road. That's what I'm saying, David. I've looked at the angles. We win no matter what they do. It's just going to get really nasty. So if the awakening explodes even faster, we may be able to back them off and have a total collapse. God bless you. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show on this Monday, Labor Day, September 2nd, 2013. I'm David Knight, and I'm going to be finishing out the show today as Alex works on the documentary, The Obama Deception 2. And as that song said, we are men of constant sorrow because we've got to constantly watch our government, watch what they're doing. One of the things we didn't mention in the last segment, I started talking about the homeschool situation. These are authoritarians who are here. Look at the way they acted with this homeschooling family that escaped from Germany. It's now our Attorney General who's saying, no, they don't deserve any asylum. They don't deserve the freedom of religion. They don't deserve the freedom of speech. They don't deserve to homeschool. They need to be sent back to Germany where their kids can be taken away. This is their attitude. This is what's going to come out here at home. And it's also very frightening, I find, that it's the same representatives, the Peter Kings, the Mike Rogers, the John Kerrys, the Obamas, who are always in favor of indefinite detention, of spying unconstitutionally on everything that all of our communications, and also supporting killing people without due process abroad using drones, always supporting the cause of war. Understand that these are authoritarians, regardless of the party that they're in, whether they call themselves Democrats or Republicans. This is the war party, and the war party is also the anti-civil liberty, the anti-Bill of Rights party. There needs to be a realignment. This division between Democrats and Republicans is phony, absolutely phony. It needs to be between the authoritarians like Mike Rogers and Peter King and Obama. It needs to be between the authoritarians and the libertarians like Justin Amash, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz. This is going to be the fundamental alignment. This is where we need to focus. We need to look beyond this. We need to look at Democrats like Kucinich, who said, why are we doing this? We're going to be the Air Force for al-Qaeda. There are good people on both the Democrats and the Republican side, and there are bad people on both sides. And we need to be able to sort them out as to where they fall on civil liberties, where they fall on war. This is a life and liberty issue. Those things need to come first. But it's also about fiscal issues. We cannot afford to do this, even for the hardcore Republicans who want to reflexively fall in line between any war, always support, they think, the military-industrial complex. They need to start supporting our troops. They need to understand that our troops are put in danger. They need to stop having our troops using depleted uranium. You want to talk about weapons of mass destruction? Let's talk about the long-term permanent effects of depleted uranium wherever it's used. Let's talk about the long-term effects of depleted uranium on our soldiers. What if we had sarin gas? What if the sarin gas that the Syrian soldiers were using caused cancer, increase in the people who were using it, the soldiers who were using it? What if it caused birth defects for their children? What if it lingered in the area for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years? Sarin gas, as horrible as it is, doesn't do that. Our weapons do. Our depleted uranium does. And it was the same time that they tried to take the moral high ground and say, we're not going to use sarin gas anymore, that they went in and they started using depleted uranium. Now, earlier we had a clip of some people who were doing protests over the weekend, protesting the war. They had InfoWars shirts on. They had Ben Swan signs on. These are people who have been woken up by InfoWars, the rest of the alternative media, and they were getting hassled by the police saying they didn't have permit to demonstrate. And they said, well, our permit is actually the Constitution. And they stood them off, and the police, in that particular case, stood down. We also had that happening here in Austin. We had a demonstration. We didn't have a stand-down situation, but we had our reporters go out. Jakari Jackson went and recorded it this last weekend on Saturday, and we got a report of that right now. Let's roll that report, guys.
My name is Ben Kessler. I was in the Marine Corps from 2002 to 2006. I was infantry, served in Afghanistan in 2004. I'm out here today because I don't want to see us starting a war in Syria.
I'm Dr. Laura Presley, and I'm out here for the rally against the war in Syria that President Obama has been proposing.
The proper action for us to take is to help in a diplomatic process. There's a lot of different options that don't involve bombing or sending troops to Syria, and all of those options are better than the military options.
This president needs to remember that he was awarded the Peace Prize his first term, and that war is not peace. And yesterday I called Cornyn's office, Senator Ted Cruz's office, and Representative Congressman Mike McCall's office, and said they need to be taking a leadership role here in the state of Texas and hold President Obama accountable for this.
The U.S. That's right. You need to get involved. You need to put pressure on your congressman. They need to hear from you. You understand what this is going on? Talk to them. Let them feel the heat. We're going to be right back after the break, and we're going to be taking calls. We've got some people been on hold for quite some time. We want to hear what they say about this war coming coming up in Syria that Obama is trying to push.
We're on the march.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight. In for Alex Jones this Labor Day. As we're talking about our riders on the storm, remember that this is hurricane season. We haven't had any hurricanes. It's been an unusually quiet season. But it's not to say that we won't have some. And you want to be prepared in case that happens. We have very short lines of supply in America. You know, it's become a thing to have just-in-time inventory deliveries. That means that it's a very efficient thing for the companies that do it, but it also means that our supply lines are very, very short. If there's something like a hurricane, or there's something like a war or a false flag attack or a terrorist attack, you're not going to have very much food in the chain of supply. So you need to take some precautions for you and your family. eFoods Direct is our sponsor this hour, and you can get a 2-month supply for one person or a convenient 1-month supply for 2 people. It's called the Just In Case Food Supply. That's 800-409-5633. That's efoodsdirect.com/Alex. Now, we're going to go back and we're going to talk to callers who've been waiting quite a long time, but I've alluded to this a couple of times and haven't really explained it. This is a breaking story today, actually it came out yesterday, I should say, from the New York Times, talking about how the DEA is using phone records and spying on people. Listen to this. For the last 6 years, law enforcement officials working on counter-narcotics programs have had routine access using subpoenas to an enormous AT&T database that contains the records of decades of Americans' phone calls. It's called the Hemisphere Project. Now, this only involves records from AT&T, but AT&T has records that go back to 1987, 26 years worth of data. That's dwarfed by what the NSA claims that they're holding only 5 years worth of data. And this includes every call. This isn't just AT&T customers. This is every call that passes through an AT&T switch going back for 26 years. And the thing I find interesting about this is that, as always, the government likes to try to wiggle around all this by saying, well, this is something that the third party is supplying to us, so we don't have to get a judge to give us authorization to take a look at this. They say that well, this information is being stored by AT&T and not by the government. Therefore, it's not a problem, right? No, it is a problem. But that's what they're using with CISPA and these other programs to try to get around it. They're saying, well, if Facebook or Google or someone else has your emails or has your data, that third party can voluntarily turn it over to the government. Well, of course, they're going to voluntarily turn it over because the government gives them a lot of money and also holds a gun to their head to try to force them into doing it. So they get both a carrot and a stick. And then they say, we don't need to go before a judge and get a search warrant because we're just asking this third party who's holding this data, and they're voluntarily turning it over to us. I hope some lawmakers who have a conscience are listening to this, because that's where the law needs to be changed. It needs to be clear that the government doesn't get any information on us, even from third parties, unless they have a judge's search warrant. Now, let's go to some of the callers here. We've had Lauren in Ohio waiting for quite a while. Lauren, what do you think about this? What do you think is the least untruthful scenario for Syria?
Well, I kind of come at it a different way. I think that they just got caught pulling the app. So, because why would that guy, the one who said, oh, my son was involved and they just didn't handle him right, You know what I mean? I think they did it. They got caught because everybody was looking for them to do it, and so now they want somebody else to take the blame for it. But in the end, we have to kind of change the way. I've got solutions, and then I've got some kind of funny things because I kind of was taking notes while you were talking. Hey, so let's start saying all CIA, duh. You know what I mean?
Right.
It seems
CIA,
like the public, things they catch on. You know what I mean?
Right.
All CIA, duh. I mean, come on. Everybody should know this. And the other one is QE forever, $80 billion a month, and we don't have a problem?
That's right.
Why aren't we up in arms over this? Because we've all been in public schools, and they, of course, are run by the globalists that lie to you. So since we're made up of lies and wed to lies, then lies is what we get. But
well, and they keep bringing up these different things to, it's almost they've had so many different scandals, it's almost like they're bringing up another scandal so that they take our mind off of the previous one and we don't pay attention. It's like, don't look at that, look at this next thing. And this whole thing in Syria is a way to get people's minds off of government spying in violation of the Fourth Amendment, the IRS targeting particular people. That continues to go on, and nothing has been done about that. Nothing's been done about Fast and Furious. None of these scandals have been addressed. They've just shoved them under the rug, moved on to the next thing.
Right, but that's the whole thing about what we have to do is shatter the illusion that somehow or another governments, which is mind control, control men. The Constitution shows you exactly what the government's for. It is a body of negative law to limit the maids and the butlers. It has nothing to say about what we free kings in this country can do, and you can tell as you look at the document, the large C, the capital C changes to a lowercase c. These things mean things. But anyway, by way of solution, we need to obey God. If we did things His way, like all these soldiers standing up and saying, I'm not going to fight along all CIA, because they are unwilling to do that which is corrupt and destructive,
well,
the globalists don't have any control.
You need to get a lot of people, you need to convince a lot of Christians about the proper understanding of Romans 13. It isn't just doing whatever the government tells you to do. It's when the government gets out of line of moral authority, when the government gets out of line of its legitimate legal authority. They swear to uphold the Constitution. And when they ignore the Constitution, which is the rightful king, they no longer have any legitimate authority. That's why I'm calling them not the Obama administration, because they're not administering the government. They're not administering the Constitution. They're not following their oath of office. They're nothing but a regime. You understand how they use these words. Everybody, their enemies are always regimes, but they're an administration. They're not an administration. They don't have any legitimate authority because they've denied the Constitution. Well, thanks.
And one more thing, can I just, for control, so that, because we don't have to all get together in some group. Keep your money in your pocket, stop paying taxes you don't owe, and keep your children in your home. Teach them the truth or pay somebody, private teacher, whatever, get together with the neighbors on the block. But when we put our kids in these institutions where they lie to them and then pump them out generation after generation, what can we expect but that they don't understand the Constitution? What can we expect that they're not exposed to 10 little commandments like don't steal and kill people that never did anything to you, and don't covet what they have, especially when we're sitting on the wealth of what we're sitting on. And
Absolutely.
These people are not
Lauren,
to use it. So that's the sea change that's happening in society that you guys were talking about earlier.
I couldn't agree with you more. They've had a judge say, we had a situation in Massachusetts where a fellow was not happy with what his children were being taught in school. And he wanted to come in and see what was going on there. And they said, no, you can't come in. You can't know what they're teaching these little kids in terms of sex education. They had him arrested. And he took the case to court. And the judges said, when you take your children to the government school, you have abandoned your child to the state. That's what they said. That's not my words. That's their words. That's a quote from them. You have abandoned your children to the state. The official term, the legal term for that is in loco parentis. They're going to act in place of the parents. That's the way they see this. They see it as they have now control over your children, and they're going to instill the kind of values that they want. We've got a report here that I think is really interesting. We've been talking about this for quite some time. We saw this was going to happen here at InfoWars, and here's a report going back to May 31st. This is Darren McBreen hosting the InfoWars Nightly News, and here's what he had to say back on May 31st about this very issue in Syria that we see today.
And to make matters worse, Al-Qaeda mercenaries in Syria, or should I say Al-Qaeda mercenaries, well, they've been caught with sarin gas. This, according to Turkish officials, this is concrete evidence that CIA mercenaries operating in Syria under the leadership of the Al-Nusra Front, well, it's a terrorist group aligned with Al-Qaeda. They are in possession of deadly sarin gas, and they plan to use it against the Syrian army. But you watch, in typical NATO-U.S. false flag fashion, the Assad regime is going to be blamed or accused of using chemical weapons against the so-called rebels. And Obama will finally have his excuse to intervene militarily.
There you go.
There is a good chance
that was back May 31st, a nightly news broadcast. So get a subscription to Prisonplanet TV. It helps to support our operation. It helps to educate people. And that's what's really necessary, is for people to understand what their techniques are, what their MOs are. We were pointing that out back in May. And, of course, the UN inspectors, they had an attack back in May in Syria, and they said it was the rebels and it was sarin gas. But it was the rebels who did it. The rebels who were trying to but they were trying to give Obama an excuse to intervene there. Let's go to someone else who's been waiting for quite a while. Kyle in Texas. Kyle, what do you think about this?
Hold up. What do you think?
Caught you by surprise. I know you've been waiting a long time, and then finally we come to you. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. What I have to say about this is that with Syria and everything, and I listened to Alex Jones, and you guys done a perfect job on everything.
Oh, thank you.
Perfect job. Congratulations. Perfect job. And it probably what it did, when you described everything, it describes everything that I wrote like 2 or 3 years ago. So.
Yeah, it's a very repeating pattern. It's familiar. It's not like we've got some crystal ball. It's not like we're speculating. It's not like we're offering conspiracy theories. All we're doing is telling people, look, this is what they did last time. This is what they did 2 times ago. This is what they're doing now. They don't even change their strategy. They don't even change the narrative. They just use the same techniques over and over again. And we're trying to educate people, and it looks like it's taking. We've got 90% of the people now opposing it, as opposed to 75% of the people who supported it when we were told the same lies by the Bush administration. Anything else you want to add to that, Kyle?
Yes. When you said the Bush administration, that it goes with the Iraq War when they said there's WMDs, and I was like, what? I'm 21 now. I was probably about maybe 11 or 12 during that time when the WMDs was going to Iraq and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my mother, like, Mom, this thing is not true. There's no WMDs. And she's like, no, yeah, go play your video games. And told some of my friends about it. And they're like, they follow me as a leader.
Yeah, and it wasn't the first time when they did it in the Bush administration. The previous Bush administration had essentially come up with a false narrative to justify the very first Iraq war. They had the woman who was in saying that she'd seen the babies in the incubators, and it turns out she was an ambassador's daughter, hadn't even been there. So they keep using the same type of thing over and over again, saying, we're going to go kill people for humanitarian reasons, and they base it all on a lie. And this time, it's the least detailed story. I mean, they're even getting tired of their narratives. Thanks, Kyle. We're going to go next to, because we've got several people here who have been waiting a long time. We're going to go to Phil in Florida. Phil, what do you think about this?
Hi, David. Thanks for taking the show, and thanks for taking my call. I hope I can get out what I have to say before you have to cut in. I'm a coordinator of the Central Florida chapter of Veterans for Peace, Dr. Bob Bowman's home chapter, who we buried this weekend.
Yes.
And I need to tell you all that our organization, Veterans for Peace, at the national level, voted to impeach President Obama for the very same war crimes we cited in our call for impeaching Bush.
Yes.
And there's an article on Activist Post, which I hope InfoWars and Prisonplanet will pick up. It's called Timeline for Veterans for Peace's Vote to Impeach Obama, 2009 through 2013. And the impeachment, the claim that the left anti-war movement makes is, if it didn't happen for Bush, it won't happen for Obama. But what people don't realize, that the only time impeachment has been enough of a threat to change behavior of the administration is only when it's been a partisan call. And we're not talking about whether it'll happen or not. We're talking about who's making the call. And it was exciting news that Alex and y'all broke a week or two ago about the overpass calls for impeachment.
Yes.
But that's coming from the right, David. And we need to get the word out. There's been a suppression of this from the leadership of the national anti-war organizations because, well, like any organization, they're beholden to others.
Well, I can tell you this, Phil, that if he goes before Congress now and tries to get an authorization, and if they don't give him this authorization, and if he attacks, as the State Department told Fox News that he's going to attack anyway, whether he gets authorization or not, he will be impeached, in my opinion. I think the people are angry enough about this on both the left and the right. You have not the leadership of the Democrat Party and not even the leadership of the Republican Party were opposing him on the declaration of war. It was the lower level people, for the most part, in both parties that were saying, we need to get Congress involved on this. The right way to do this is to talk to Congress. The Constitution gives Congress the power to decide this, not the president. So it's coming from others in the Congress other than the leadership. And I think that it's people from both parties. They're going to push back pretty hard, and the American people are going to be outraged, extremely angry. This is the most unpopular war we've ever had, proposed war we've ever had.
And we have to talk about Walter Jones, and you all had him on a year ago.
Yes.
He has a resolution that the left anti-war people don't want their rank and file to know about, and that's the threat of impeachment should Obama do this. And you're not hearing the anti-war people, this partisan crap. And Dr. Bob Bowman did a great interview with Alex in studio in July of '09, and it's on the Alex Jones YouTube channel. It's called "The American People Are Artificially Divided," and you alluded to that earlier, David. But please, we've got to get your congressmen to get behind HCR 3, which threatens impeachment, because this is all good. The shift in the tide that you were talking about is all well and good, but it ain't enough.
That's right.
There's got to be some kind of threat, real threat from the people to stop. This guy already demonstrated he with Libya that he doesn't care if he has Congress or not. So,
that's right. We've had Walter Jones on. We've had Walter Jones on talking about that. I'm sure he's going to be on shortly talking about that again.
I hope so.
Need to really hold their feet to the fire on this. And we need to understand, as I said before, there has to be a realignment. We have to understand that it's the same people who are trashing the Bill of Rights, who are saying there is no due process, there is no privacy anymore, and we have a right to go to war without talking to Congress in every aspect. It's the same people who are opposing our civil rights, who are also wanting to start a war, and they will bring that to America. They will use that war machine here domestically. They've already brought back a lot of equipment. They're purchasing bullets. They're gearing up for a domestic war, and they have the lack of moral authority to do it right here. We're going to take some more calls. We'll be right back after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. And, of course, we've been talking all day about the changes that happened this weekend. We saw Obama blink and back down. We all expected him to launch a quote-unquote surgical strike. Of course, we know what that means. There's nothing at all surgical about launching missiles into a country. But we saw him back down from that action. We saw him say he still asserted that he had the authority to do that, even though there's nothing about that in the Constitution about him acting unilaterally when there is no imminent danger to the United States. When the United States is not under attack, he does not have the authority to do that. But he asserted that he did, but he was going to be magnanimous and go before Congress. And now we see that congressmen who have looked at what he wants are saying, ooh, this is really broad. This is not just a surgical strike. And of course it isn't. They pre-positioned a lot of ships, a lot of planes, a lot of men and material. They were going to Turkey to get an authorization for 60,000 American troops to be stationed in Turkey. They're looking for a broader war. They're not tired of war, but we are tired of their lies, and the American people are pushing back. But it's not just the American people. There is a global awakening, and that's coming from Zbigniew Brzezinski, who used that exact phrase. You see, even in Turkey, they said they didn't want the U.S. troops. You see that Britain, for the first time in 200 years, turned down the prime minister's calls for an authorization for an attack, for war. And you see that there's only 9% of the people are buying what Obama is selling here. So we've got a couple of callers who've been waiting on the phone for a long time, and I want to know what they think about this, because now is a time for you to continue to press this point. The American people have woken up. Even the sheeple are not with Obama. So it's time for those of us who know what's going on, who've seen this pattern happen over and over again, it's time for us to get involved and to stop the killing, to stop the bleeding of blood and of treasury into this never-ending war machine called the military-industrial complex. We got Mark in California, and then coming up, we've got Frank in North Carolina. Mark, are you there? What do you think about this?
Yeah, yesterday I was finishing up with a sermon in John 5:36 there as I was street preaching in Burlingame, California, and I walked up to 10 of the officers there across the street chatting and watching over us all, and I mentioned, hey, you ought to check out this Infowars.com guy. He interviewed a bunch of cops there in Oklahoma City about the federal building back in April 19th, and they said they'd all tune in, so I'd like to say hi to all the officers there if they did. And many should follow the shining example of this listener, as he has a Infowars.com and Radio Liberty bumper sticker. That always helps people, out of curiosity, tune in because of that.
Yeah.
But, for reasons of national security, I was driving down Leavenworth Street there in San Francisco trying to keep an eye on the former head of the National Security Agency leader, the so-called great Michael Aquino. Do you know anything about Michael Aquino, David?
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah, it's a Church of, what was it, Church of Satan? Yeah, Church of Satan that he had going on there, and there was quite a bit of a child abuse scandal that happened there around the Presidio, right?
Yeah, he's the worst child murderer in all of history.
And highly connected in the NSA. The NSA got him out of the military moved him out of that area, even though a chaplain's 4-year-old child said, pointed him out and even described that he had a room that had all black walls. Even though all of that happened, basically the Army, the NSA, bailed him out of all of that.
Yeah, what's up with that? The Lamb of God is watching you, Michael. He's going to get you. But anyway, the fact of the matter is, David, is there's coming a day of judgment. And Jesus is writing all this stuff down. And when some bleep, and I don't know his name or I'd use it on the air, from the FBI, told the chief of police, get this, David, the chief of police in San Francisco.
We're out of time. I'm sorry. Yeah. Hey, tell you what, we'll pick that phone call up on the other side of the hour. Let's go into overdrive. I want to get to Frank in North Carolina as well. So we'll be right back in overdrive. Go to Infowars.com to continue listening.
Thank you for listening to GC.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. We're now on overdrive because I wanted to finish up with these callers. We were right in the middle of a call from Mark in California, and Frank in North Carolina has been holding since almost the beginning of the program. So we wanted to hear what Frank had to say. Mark, go ahead and continue with where you were.
Yeah, well, you might want to interview with Doug Millar. He passed out a bunch of leaflets around Leavenworth, Michael Aquino's house there in San Francisco, warning the neighbors, that this guy is a very, very bad guy, Doug Millar. I don't know if you know Ted Gunderson, but Ted Gunderson, a great guy in the FBI who's passed away and probably was poisoned by Michael Aquino's buds because he died of arsenic poisoning. He said that Doug Millar was the #1 authority exposing Michael Aquino. And it's amazing how audacious this devil-worshipping, murderous pedophile is. And God's going to get you, Michael. But he went up and he tried to get a restraining order against Doug Millar and Peter Chernoff for exposing him. And the judge in San Francisco had the audacity, as Peter was allegedly molested by Michael Aquino, and he read these facts, the judge threatened Peter Chernoff that he might go to jail if he didn't stop reading it. And Peter Chernoff said, I realized fully that I could go to jail. It was sitting there with Michael Aquino, Doug Millar, and himself. And then the judge, you know what he did? Did he bring him into a back room to find out if Peter Chernoff was lying about Michael Aquino or not? No. He walked out of the room.
Yeah.
He walked out of the room, David.
It's a long-standing situation we've reported on here over and over again. You see it, the pattern being repeated everywhere. As Jimmy Savile in the UK, you see U.S. ambassadors that are involved in child prostitution rings. You see things happening in CPS all over the country. It's a very disturbing pattern, but as you pointed out, there's a very dark satanic side to this. We also see, as Alex, when he went to Bohemian Grove, it was a pretty eye-opening episode for a lot of people all over the world to see how the leaders of the West would get together and enact something that looked like it was out of some Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom movie. I mean, it was bizarre. First time I saw it, I was just absolutely astounded. But the more you look at it, the more you see the pattern evolving everywhere. It's a very widespread pattern. Let's go to Frank in North Carolina. Thank you, Mark. Let's go to Frank in North Carolina. Frank, what do you think about this Syria situation?
Well, I've got several points I want to make on that, but first I'd like to suggest a movie for you and the audience to take a look at that I saw as a young boy. It's called Capricorn 1. It's from 1978, starring the good old evil Hal Holbrook and 9/11 truther James Brolin. And the story basically dramatizes, criminal elements of the government and the lengths that they go to cover up their lies and conspiracies, compartmentalism. It's even got the Michael Hastings investigative reporter scene about midway through the movie where they tamper with his car and kill him. But anyway, with this Syria situation, the Obama puppet regime seems to be saying that they don't want to attack or invade Syria, but they've been left no choice. Right. But where I'm coming from on this is, Army General Wesley Clark stated that he was visiting one of his former offices. This is many years ago, and I forget, it might have been the Pentagon or something, but one of his officers took him aside and said, "Hey, you're not going to believe what's going on. I've been told we're going to invade Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Iran, etc." Then you got the Project for a New American Century, PNAC. Syria was on their list of countries that they were going to invade. And then you got the Secretary of the Treasury, George W. Bush appointee. I believe his name was Paul O'Neill. I've seen the interview on YouTube. I think it might have been with Leslie Stahl or someone like that. I think it was blacked out. I don't think it ever aired, but in that interview, he stated that in his first cabinet meeting that he sat in, they were told they were going to invade Afghanistan.
Absolutely.
Now, he claims that was months before 9/11 ever happened, but the last point I want to make is they decide what they're going to do.
Well, we're out of time for today, and it's an amazing, exciting time, and it is time for you to get involved, wake up other people. Tune them in to Infowars.com and the alternative media, and we're going to be right back tomorrow at 11 Central, 12 Eastern Time.